NFL mock draft season starts now. Before we get into it, I do want to say thank you for all the support on this new channel. We're on the road to 100 subscribers. My birthday's around the corner, so help me get there if you enjoy draft content, as we already have a lot of positional ranking videos out on the channel, and there's plenty more to come this week, next week, and every single week up until the NFL draft. Now, we're over on NFL Mock Draft Database. This is a website I prefer over the other popular ones like PFF and others. But let's get into it, man. We're going to do one round here today. Keep it simple. And of course, as always, leave your thoughts in the comments section below. Number one overall, the Las Vegas Raiders are here, and I'm going to have them trading. I'm just joking. I'm just joking. Look, they need a quarterback. They have Tom Brady now in that front office. I don't think they have to rush Mendoza on the field as soon as day number one. Now, with the number one overall pick, that's usually the path, right? They get drafted and then they're expected to have the entire franchise on their back from day number one. Hopefully, Tom Brady gets in the ear of that front office and maybe they want to sit him for a month. Let him at least get used to the speed of the NFL. And then when this team is 1-3 with Geno Smith, you put Geno to the side, you let Mendoza shine, and go from there. But Mendoza is the best quarterback in the class, and he goes number one. And number two, there's a lot of ways the New York Jets can go. Now, for Aaron Glenn, you're in a year where I think you are coaching for your job. So for the New York Jets, you need edge help, really defensive help in general, and it comes down to Arvell Reese. You have David Bailey, you have Ruben Bain. Personally, if I'm in that front office making that call with Aaron Glenn as my coach, I'm going to go with a surefire guy that can be an all Pro Bowl, all pro level player for many, many years, and that is Ruben Bain. Outside of the concerns about his arm length, this is a guy that I know can be a great anchor in the run game. He can disrupt the passer. He's going to demand double teams there in the pass rush approach. And overall, he's going to just be the centerpiece of this defense for many, many years. Now, down the board, you have a lot of picks. I think you have 4 in the first 2 rounds. Use those picks to address the offense or the offensive line or the rest of this defensive secondary. But as of now, we're going to get best player available. And to me, that is Ruben Bain at number 2 overall. And number 3 is the Arizona Cardinals. Now, again, you just go best player available and say Arvell Reese. Or you can address this offense. I do like their defensive line. Of course, I do like Walter Nolan. You guys know this here. And I like some of their other pieces in the front 7. However, obviously they need some help. I just think that they can get that help down the board, whereas of now, they can address that offensive front. And that comes down to Spencer Fanu, who can play 4 positions, or you can get Francis Mauigoa there out of Miami, who, sure, I think as of now, Francis Mauigoa is a better prospect than a Spencer Fanu, but I don't think he has the versatility of a Spencer Fanu. So given the all-around bad offensive line that Arizona has, I think they do lean towards Spencer Fanu, as this is a guy, again, can play multiple positions on the offensive front. So no matter what they want to do down the board, he can fit and do it at a very high level. And number 4 is the Tennessee Titans. Now, Robert Saleh, of course, is the new head coach leading the ship here in Tennessee. They're getting a new logo, which I think is really, really cool. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. It is much resemblant of the Houston Oilers logo there for many, many years. They're going back to a lighter blue, mixing in some red. All in all, it's a really cool logo. But you need a player on that defense that, next to Jeffrey Simmons, can shine in these new colors. And I think it comes down to Arvell Reese or David Bailey. I think leaning towards a guy like Arvell Reese, a guy that you can use off the edge like a David Bailey, or he's going to be a lot better in coverage there compared to a David Bailey. I think the overall complete package leans towards an Arvell Reese for Robert Saleh to start his tenure there at Tennessee. Watch out for them to be big spenders in free agency, if not the trade market here in coming weeks. And number 5 is the New York Giants. And I think this was a surefire pick with the player that I want to give them here in just a moment. But in recent weeks, we've seen interviews of John Harbaugh talking about a guy like Caleb Downs at the safety position. And full transparency, he's my number 1 player this year. I think Caleb Downs is the best overall talent in this year's class. I think he is a guaranteed Pro Bowl player. And if you can get him at number 5, though he is at a position that doesn't hold a lot of value compared to your edge rushers, your quarterbacks, your offensive tackles, I think you can make an excuse to draft a safety at 5 and be okay with it. However, historically, NFL teams don't draft a player at that position this high. The last New York team that did it drafted Jamal Adams, and well, that didn't really work out. I don't know if Jamal Adams finished his rookie contract before the Jets shipped him out of town. But for the Giants at 5, there is intrigue to draft a Caleb Downs because of how much that John Harbaugh lights up when he talks about him, and because he drafted a Kyle Hamilton early in the first round just a few years back. However, I think when you look at this offense, they are depleted. Wan'Dale Robinson might be on his way out the door. And with only a returning Malik Nabers in this offense, you don't have any weapons outside of an injury returning Malik Nabers, right? You don't have a legitimate tight end, maybe Daniel Bellinger. You don't have great running backs. You don't, Scattable's coming back, but of course, also coming off an injury. You don't have a lot of options in this offense if you can't retain a Wan'Dale Robinson. So I think that comes down to leaning towards a wide receiver pick, even if they might favor a Caleb Downs on their overall big board. I'm going to personally lean towards Jordan Tyson. Are there injury concerns? Absolutely. But I think when you look at the prospect of a Jordan Tyson, if he tests well, if his injury, if these teams can look past his injury history, you're getting the best overall talent at this position in this year's class. And if you can get the Tyson that I think we can all project he's going to be at the next level, you have two Pro Bowl, all-pro level wide receivers, a duo that in their peak, in their prime, can rival the T. Higgins, Jamar Chase duo across the league, right? I think at this point, you're giving Jackson Dart the best overall weapons possible next to his Camp Scatabo. And down the board, you can address your offensive line or your secondary, which does need desperate help. But overall, I'm leaning towards Jordan Tyson at number 5. I'm rambling. Let's pick up the speed. And number 6 is my Cleveland Browns. We'll keep this short and simple. We could make a strength, adding to it, getting a David Bailey on this defensive front, but I think Francis Mauigoa is the obvious selection. The Browns have had so many injuries on their offensive front in recent years. Now you have a potential franchise guy in Shedeur Sanders. We got to protect him. Hopefully we can get Shedeur to stay in the pocket more so than running out every single play. Francis Mauigoa is a great start in doing just that. And number 7 is maybe my first controversial take, as the Commanders are up here, and with Bobby Wagner at 35 years old, potentially on his way out the door, probably back to the Seattle Seahawks, you desperately need a linebacker. Now, you could also make a great case for David Bailey. But personally, I think Dan Quinn loves his veteran linebackers, guys that are super smart, guys that are super athletic, and they can fly around and make a bunch of plays. Whether if you go back to his Atlanta days with Deion Jones, or of course, recently with Bobby Wagner, where he got the best out of Bobby outside of the coverage department of these past couple seasons. I think he's going to lean towards a linebacker, and that is a Sonny Styles, a guy that definitely has an argument to be a top 10 pick in this year's draft. I personally love Sonny Styles. He could be the green dot center of this defense for many, many years, and you can add it to your offense or to the rest of your defense down the board, because I do think there's deeper classes than this linebacker group, which I do think is very top heavy. So Sonny Styles at 7, bit of a controversial take, but I think Washington would love that selection there. Now, number 8 is the New Orleans Saints. The New Orleans Saints could go David Bailey as well, and I sound like a broken record. David Bailey is a phenomenal talent, but when you look at this Saints team, I think they're going to want to bring back a Chase Young. So if that's the case, you can get younger edge rushers down the board or maybe in free agency. So I think they lean towards receiver. And getting a Carnell Tate, adding to this Ohio State themed wide receiver room, is huge for Tyler Shuck and his development for many, many years down the line. Just like my argument with the Jackson Dart, you have that exact case here with the New Orleans Saints. Give your young quarterback as many outlets as possible and make his job easier than it needs to be. That is my reasoning behind drafting a Carnell Tate, super solid all-around wide receiver that can play many roles there next to Chris Olave, Juwan Jennings, and Alvin Kamara. All of a sudden, this offense has a lot of pieces to make some noise with Kellen Moore running the show. And number 9 is really unprecedentedly, that's not really a word, but hey, stick with me, the Kansas City Chiefs. I think they need edge help. I think that's obvious. And I think at this point, though he is not a typical Spagnola defensive line prospect, I think the talent is too much to look past. Getting a David Bailey at number 9 for the Kansas City Chiefs gives them a different element on that defensive front. As, yes, there are concerns about the ability to keep David Bailey on the field against the run, But I think as far as being the most complete pass rusher in the class, he checks that box. He's so explosive off the edge. 14 and a half sacks last year, as well as other forced fumbles caused throughout the season. I think he had the highest pressure rate amongst all edge rushers in this class. Obvious pick for the Chiefs at number 9. Another obvious pick is the Cincinnati Bengals at number 10. I'm going to give them a Caleb Downs. I talked so highly of him earlier in today's video. Really, he checks all the boxes as far as being an all-pro level safety at the next level. He might be the most complete safety prospect we've ever seen. And for him to go to a depleted Cincinnati Bengals defense, staying in state, makes too much sense for, again, a very bad defense there in Cincinnati. Hopefully, the GMs make the obvious selection. Now, Miami at pick 11, as of today and as of an hour ago, Tyreek Hill got released. So now do you explore the idea of drafting a Mekhi Lemon at number 11 for this offense? That's definitely on the table. However, I think the best way to do that is with a Mansour Delane. He could be your number 1 corner for years down the line. You desperately need help in that department. And sure, there's other holes to fill. But again, I think this is a year where you reset a bit and put yourself in a great position next year to be in line for one of these top quarterbacks coming out, like an Arch Manning, like a Josh Hoover, etc., etc. And number 12 is the Dallas Cowboys. Just like the Miami Dolphins, they need cornerback help. And I'm going to go with Jeremiah McCoy, a guy that last year didn't play because of a pretty serious knee injury. But due to what we've seen in the past from him 2 years ago, he could have been a top cornerback in last year's class, which was pretty top heavy. But as far as physical tools, as far as what we've seen in years prior, he definitely has an argument to be a top corner off the board in this year's class. And I think Tennessee is going to go after a number 1 corner, especially because they no longer have a Trevon Diggs. At pick 13, this is going to be my one and only trade in today's video, simply because I think it makes sense for both teams. I think for the LA Rams, the player that I would give you at 13, I'm going to give you down the board. I'm going to have the LA Rams trading down a couple of spots with the Minnesota Vikings, giving, I guess, the Rams a couple extra midday picks where the Vikings get aggressive. They trade up for a guy that I think on paper is an absolute perfect fit. He's not only going to be the bell cow in this offense, but he adds a change of pace, and he's going to make J.J. McCarthy's job a lot easier. We don't know the future of a Jordan Addison with his off-the-field issues, with his injury history. We don't know where he's going to be playing for sure going into next season. So getting a Jeremiah Love, a guy that is looked at to be a generational running back prospect next to maybe the best receiver in the game in Justin Jefferson, makes a lot of sense. When you add in this decent offensive front, TJ Hawkinson, Aaron Jones, I think it makes too much sense on paper for the Vikings to get aggressive and to get potentially a generational running back. At 14 is the Baltimore Ravens. They need a lot of help in a lot of different places. And now with the new regime coming in, they need to set the tone. And for me, I think that is an obvious Peter Woods selection to get some help up front. Uncertainty about the future of a Justin Nnamdi Madubuike, as he had a pretty serious neck injury. We don't know if he's playing football next year or for years down the line. So they need to start up front because we've seen now with, I guess, what the last 3 Super Bowl champions, it starts with a dominant defensive front. If you can get that pat down, if you can have a great rotation of guys, you can control the line of scrimmage, put your offense in great positions, and really go far into the playoffs. So Peter Woods, to me, super twitchy, super powerful, best overall interior defensive lineman in this year's class, and he is a top 10 player on my overall board. At number 15, this team also needs defensive line help, but most notably on the edge. And you're going to see this pick a lot across a lot of mock drafts, and it's simply because Todd Bowles loves this style of edge. He loves the bendy edges that can get after the quarterback in a hurry and be really, really effective in the pass game. And that this year is a Cassius Howell out of Texas A&M. You have questions about his ability to stay on the field in the run game, but with the rest of the defensive line that Tampa Bay has, there are some questions, but Cassius Howell can be just a great situational pass rusher, and he's going to be able to get after the younger quarterbacks like Tyler Shuck, like Michael Penix there, and Bryce Young as well. So Cassius Howell to Tampa Bay makes a lot of sense, and that's why you see it a lot here in this offseason. At 16 is the New York Jets. Now, they have a lot of directions they can go, and honestly, if I was the GM, I might just say, well, we've lost a couple pieces in years prior. Let's just continue to make a strength and add a Keldrick Folk next to Ruben Bain on this defensive front to completely shut down offenses like the Buffalo Bills and their running attack, like the New England Patriots, two offenses that love to run the football. You can make that a lot harder for those offenses, adding a Keldrick Folk and a Ruben Bain. But I think there's bigger needs on the offensive side of the ball. And though we don't know who the quarterback is, we do know that this coach and Aaron Glenn came from a system that had a similar wide receiver from USC in Amon-Ra St. Brown. Guys that are crafty. They are very good, though they are undersized in contested catch situations. And Mekhi Lemon is just an overall dog, man. I love him. I wish my Browns could get him. But he's down here at number 16, and I think the Jets will take advantage of that. And if you're wondering about the potential quarterback pick there, as there's buzz around Ty Simpson going in the middle round, the middle part of this first round, I think if he's there at 33, that is the appropriate value of a Ty Simpson for one of these teams that want to go and get him. But I'm not going to spoil it. He might show up at the end of this first round. At 17 is the Detroit Lions. Pretty obviously, they need trench help. Now, it comes down to defensive line or, of course, interior offensive linemen. Personally, I think they lean towards the edge rusher to help out Aiden Hutchinson to get after the quarterbacks in this division, like a J.J. McCarthy, like a Jordan Love, and a Caleb Williams. So with that in mind, not only do you need to get after those quarterbacks, you need to stop their run games. Of course, Chicago has two great running backs. Minnesota now has Jeremiyah Love. And of course, Josh Jacobs is still there in Green Bay, being as dominant as he can be. So one of these edge rushers that can be great at stopping the run, but also get after the passer, is TJ Parker. Most people would probably say go after Keldrick Folk. He might be the best run defender in the class, but as far as an overall complete package, I think TJ Parker is a better edge prospect than Keldrick Folk, so I have him there at number 17 to the Detroit Lions. At 18 is the LA Rams. Let's remember, I had them trading down in this spot to go to pick 18. They picked up a couple additional mid-round picks for a player that I would have had them draft at 13. Avion Terrell might be the most technically sound corner in the class, and though he's not my next highest rated corner, I do think that as far as value goes, getting him at pick 18 is a huge addition to this defensive secondary to go against the star-studded wide receivers in this division like Marvin Harrison, Michael Wilson, like JSN, Cooper Kupp, etc., etc. Terrell fills a big void and need on that secondary there in LA for Sean McVay and company. At 19 is the Carolina Panthers. They need defensive line help to go against the running backs of a Bijan Robinson, Alvin Kamara, right? Bucky Irving and company there in Tampa Bay. They need to add to this defensive front. I think Keldrick Folk is the best run defender in the class, and he goes there to Carolina and fills a big void. At 20 is the Dallas Cowboys. This might cause some controversy, so stick with me here, but when I look at my overall big board and I say, okay, who's the best at the linebacker position? Who do I think is one of the best linebacker prospects I've ever scouted? That's Anthony Hill. Now, as you see on this screen here, they have him projected to go in the second round. Now, when you look at Anthony Hill as a prospect, I think he's super smart. I think he decepts plays very well. He puts his defensive lineman in the right spots. He's great in coverage, super twitchy, and he gets after the ball carriers, man. I think he's the best linebacker in this year's class, and for him to potentially be a steal down the board for Dallas, I think would be huge, man. Think of a Sean Lee, right? Sean Lee wasn't a Mike linebacker, but for his ability to fly sideline to sideline for Dallas for so many years, to really just have so many tackles, game in and game out, and for him to be great in coverage, he was a game changer for that Dallas defense for so many years. I think Anthony Hill can have a similar, if not better, impact, given that he shouldn't be as injured as Sean Lee was all those years there in Dallas. So again, I know it's a bit of a reach, but I think as far as a prospect goes, he's the best linebacker in this year's class. And to get him and Jermod McCoy, that defense should be night and day better going into next season. Let's not forget Dallas also was able to bring back a George Pickens. So Dallas could take advantage of that wide open division next season. At 21 is another controversial take, because when you look at this Pittsburgh roster and what PFF will tell you as far as what their biggest needs are, it's wide receiver, which I can agree with. And maybe offensive line, maybe you can add to the secondary. To me personally, when you look at the history of Pittsburgh, they kind of just go who fits the identity, who's going to fit that Pittsburgh mentality of just being vicious and violent down on a down-to-down basis. I think CJ Allen fits that void. And to add on to this reasoning, they potentially might lose Patrick Queen this offseason. So you need a Mike linebacker, a guy that can fit that Pittsburgh identity. And I just like CJ Allen. I think he's underrated in coverage, super athletic, and he's a tone setter. Pittsburgh, you guys are going to love a CJ Allen, even if it feels like a reach at 21. At 22, we have the LA Chargers. This one's obvious. This one's boring, but it is necessary. If Rashawn Slater can come back healthy, if Joe Alt can come back healthy, and now you add a Vega Ione out of Penn State, you are completing this offensive front, and you are not having the worst offensive line in football anymore in front of your star-studded quarterback in Justin Herbert. So for the Chargers, to add to this run game, to protect Justin Herbert, it makes too much sense to grab the star-studded guard out of Penn State. At 23 is an interesting spot as the Philadelphia Eagles could go with Kenyon Sadiq. And I think the majority of mock drafts out there will have them going with Kenyon Sadiq because they are not going to be able to retain a Dallas Goedert this offseason due to how much he potentially could be asking for. But when you read around beat writers for Philadelphia Eagle beat writers and the buzz around their fans, they want to continue to add to this secondary as they're going to lose Adoree Jackson this offseason, a guy that really was a down spot to their defensive secondary last year. So I look at the cornerback prospects and I look at the beat writers and what they're rumored to look after. According to those guys, they love Colton Hood out of Tennessee, a guy that this year was really supposed to be a cornerback too because Jermod McCoy was projected to play. But with the injury that Jermod McCoy had, Colton Hood had to be the lockdown cornerback one in a loaded SEC conference, and he was dominant. If you want to look at the stats, the PFF grades, his physical tools and abilities, Colton Hood, don't be shocked if he goes even higher than where I have him going at pick 23. I think he's going to test extremely well, and a lot of people might be a lot higher on him as this draft process and offseason continues. At 24 are my Cleveland Browns back on the clock, and we have our franchise quarterback. We have drafted Francis Maui Noah now out of Miami to be our right tackle. I think we need to continue to add to this offense. And I think the obvious pick here is to get a number one wide receiver. And though he is not my number one guy left on the board, as far as team fit, what the Browns need, with no Jerry Jeudy, now no David Njoku, Denzel Boston at 6'4" gives us that number one wide receiver in a new offense with Todd Monken. So hopefully they can use him in a lot of different ways. Let's not forget the Browns still have guys like Cedric Tillman, Isaiah Bond, Harold Fannin, Quinshon Judkins. So it's not the greatest room of weapons, but definitely a young group, and hopefully they can continue to grow and develop as a unit. They're next to Shedeur Sanders, and hopefully Todd Monken can get the absolute best out of these younger stars. At 25 is the Chicago Bears. Closing out on this first round, I got to get a Gator in this first round. Is this biased? Maybe. But I do think Caleb Banks slightly, based on his physical tools and his potential upside, edges out a Lee Hunter, and for a Bears team that is in a division with two great Detroit running backs, two great Minnesota running backs. Again, let's remember that Jeremiah Love is now in this division, but also a Josh Jacobs. You need to add interior defensive line help, and Caleb Banks can do that at a high level. If you want to bring a Grady Jarrett back, he could be a great mentor to a Caleb Banks. And again, he's a huge individual, man. He's going to be filling quite literally a big void on that defensive front there for the Chicago Bears. At 26 is the Buffalo Bills. They need help everywhere, right? You could go offensive line. You could go defense in general. Best player available in that sense. But I think when you look at Josh Allen, you cannot continue to push this off. You need to add to this weapon room that Josh Allen doesn't really have outside of Khalil Shakir and occasionally Dalton Kincaid. Let's give him a wide receiver. And that is going to be Kevin Recepcion, a guy that is a bit undersized on paper, 5'10", 5'11", like 190 pounds. But he doesn't play like that. He might have the highest jump in this class as far as as far as height is concerned. He gets up there, man. He plays like a 6'3" wide receiver at times. He can really get off the ground and win those jump ball situations. But when you get the ball in his hands is when magic happens. He might be the best in the class as far as yards after catch ability, and the Bills get a steal here down the board at 26 next to Shakir to add some juice to this offense. At 27 is the San Francisco 49ers. You could go tight end. You could go defensive line. I think they need tackle. Whether if it's this year in the offseason or next year, Trent Williams will be hanging it up sometime soon. So to get a Caden Proctor, a guy that this year can play right tackle, but also has the flexibility next year to slide over to left tackle and be that left tackle and blindside guy for years down the line, is huge. I think he's good in zone scheme offenses, which is what Alabama like to run. And San Francisco does that at a very high level. So Caden Proctor can learn from one of the all-time greats, but also slide into that left tackle spot whenever Trent Williams hangs it up down the line. At 28 is the Houston Texans. Just like San Francisco, they need offensive line help. You can go a lot of different ways. Personally, I think the best way to go here is a Caleb Lomo. A guy that can play multiple positions on the offensive front. He's super agile, so you can play him again in a lot of different spots, and he can survive. He has a big frame to him. You could go with a Monroe Freeling at this point as well. I don't hate that idea, but for Houston, getting a Lomo makes a lot of sense. Let's protect CJ Stroud, and hopefully next year we can actually determine if he's going to be a franchise guy, because in the playoffs, yes, he threw 4 interceptions, but that dude didn't have 2 seconds to throw. He also didn't have his number 1 wide receiver. At 29 is the LA Rams. Now, if you're asking me if I'm in the front office, what I would do, it would be to add an offensive lineman. Whether if that is Monroe Freeling, Blake Miller, if you want to go Emmanuel Pregnon, that is a great pick as well. But as far as the reports, as far as the positional value, and as far as when you look at your MVP quarterback and what is to come, I think the move for them actually is going to be Ty Simpson. Ty Simpson going to back up a Matthew Stafford makes sense in the fact that he's a very smart quarterback. He is a son of a former coach. He's very good in only 15 career starts as far as setting his protections, audibling to the right play. He showed that on display many times at Alabama last season. Now, the experience is a real concern. But if you get a Ty Simpson at the end of the first round, you get 5 years on that rookie contract. You can use the first 2 of them to learn from Matthew Stafford. So when Matthew Stafford rides off into the sunset, you now have 3 years of Ty Simpson, again, plus that 5th-year option, that you can see what you have. And hopefully he's ready to take over from that 3rd year, from day number 1 on. So this offense doesn't miss a beat. But Ty Simpson, I think, is the pick here. You're taking a shot in the dark on a guy at the end of the first round. Again, positional value, you have to take that into account. I think it makes sense for the Rams. Would I do it? No, but for the Rams, predicting them, I think that's probably the route they're going to go. A lot of their beat writers, a lot of the insiders of the Rams, they seem to love that pick. At 30 is the Denver Broncos. This will be Kenyon Sadiq. They need a tight end. Hopefully he can add that different juice and element to their offense that Everett Ingram really didn't at all. At 31 is the New England Patriots. They need defensive line, right? I think you can go offensive line, especially interior, especially with how Jared Wilson played in the playoffs there, especially late. But I think I'm going to go with an edge rusher, a guy that can slide in next to Milton Williams and Barmore and the rest of the group that they have there in New England. And getting a guy like Akeem Messidor, he's not only experienced, but he's great all around, man. The only downside is that he's already going to be 25 years old. I just don't think Mike Vrabel is going to care about that. I think getting a Akeem Messidor, and they can also trade for a wide receiver if they want to trade for an A.J. Brown. I don't think that would entail giving up their first-round pick. So for New England, Akeem Messidor late in the draft, a guy that's going to be able to plug and play and dominate from day number 1. And finally, to close out the first round, it was the Seattle Seahawks. Shout out to them again for winning your first Super Bowl in about a decade. Always nice to see franchises, freshening things up. Though Mahomes is always fun to watch, you like to see things. You like to see different teams at the top of the mountain. For them, though, you potentially could lose a Tariq Woolen this offseason. The easy fix is to go back to a college that produced a all-pro level safety for you this past season, which was Nick Eamon. Let's go out there and get the same mold of player, a ball of muscle, an athletic freak, a bit raw, but I think you can develop that in Seattle, obviously with a great coaching staff led by Mike McDonald. So Brandon Cisse out of South Carolina goes to the Seattle Seahawks. If I can get that out correctly. So on your screen, I will scroll through this first round. We had one big trade where the Rams moved down, pick up some extra mid-round picks, and the Vikings got aggressive for Jeremiyah Love. But I will scroll down through this first round as I will come to a close here and tell you guys thank you. If you made it to this point in the video, that is, of course, one way to say thank you. But also, if you enjoyed, please subscribe to the channel as these mock drafts are going to be coming out heavy. The rest of this week, we'll have my favorite players at every single position. I would do a mock the mock later in the week. So if you want me to review a mock draft in particular, leave that down in the comments section below. But there it is, man. Round 1, mock draft 1.0.